out of his busy schedule from MLSsoccer.com, Dan Itel. Dan, welcome again, my friend.
Thanks for having me, Anthony.
Pleasure's all mine. Dan, let's talk about the game first and foremost. Portland Timbers and Seattle. Seattle coming out on top, but two teams, let's be honest, that have really struggled this year. But the thing that bothers me, Dan, is the complaining, the whining of Coach Porter once again. Whether it's the refs, whether it's a player, whatever it is, I think it's getting tiresome, and I think it's showing his, to be honest, his inexperience as a guy that hasn't coached in MLS for a long time. Yeah, he's done some good things, but I think the whining's going to catch up to him. Your thoughts?
Yeah, I can certainly see why that rubs a lot of people the wrong way. We live in an accountability business in professional sports, and whether you get bad calls, that's always going to be part of the game. And so I understand that side of it for sure. To play devil's advocate and just, and maybe provide a little insight into his thinking. I think he honestly believes that when he speaks out, and other coaches have done this as well. Peter Vermees was complained about the refs as well. I feel like with the way the officiating in MLS is growing, and they're always constantly looking to improve. I feel like some coaches feel like if they speak out, then their voices will be heard by whoever's in power, and it could affect some sort of change. But I think there's also a way to do that behind the scenes and not do it publicly, where you're certainly going to get a lot of negative backlash.
I wish things would change because, to be honest, Greg Vanney up here with Toronto for, I would say, the early part of the season, now he's leveled off, continuously complained about the way that Giovinco was being hacked and whacked and treated out there. And I agreed with him on many of accounts. I think some of these guys, unfortunately, are not at this level. And a lot of the guys that are at this level are themselves still making rookie mistakes. And, I don't think anything's going to happen until the offseason, when maybe you get a new influx of some younger guys coming in. Because, to be honest, Toledo, Gantar, I don't know who else I'm missing. Some of these guys, you just cringe when you see them out there reffing when they're in your home city.
Yeah. Yeah, and I don't think Kate was complaining about specific calls. There was a questionable penalty call in that game, and his biggest complaint, I think, and the biggest issue I think you see a lot of coaches talking about, is the fact that there's just so much inconsistency. And in a game like Portland and Seattle, it's going to be physical. It's going to be fast-paced, high, emotions flowing. So I think it's key for referees to set a tone early with that consistency of a call. And what Caleb said was, I didn't know what a foul was in that game. Sometimes, a guy would get run over and there would be no call, and other times he would barely get touched and there would be a foul. So I think that's, over the course of the season, the biggest beef of all these coaches with the refereeing. And I agree with them. I think the refereeing is way too inconsistent, and there needs to be some accountability.
And I'll finish off with this, and you followed the league for a number of years, as I have, Dan. And I said this even Saturday in a couple fouls that Giovinco took hard. One with Chiman, and I think the other one was Oduro that went right at him hard. And I tweeted this out. If this was Beckham, those fouls would have been called instantly. Cards would have been given, maybe even an ejection. And I think this is where people are starting to get upset. You're seeing Kaká not getting the respect, Giovinco. Keane is a pit bull. He can take care of himself and score and be an MVP, so you don't need to worry about him. But I think that's where a lot of these clubs and coaches get upset.
Yeah, and you want to protect your star players, and in every sport there is that star player, kind of treatment that they get, and I don't know that you're seeing it in MLS. Sometimes you do, and with other players you don't. I don't know what the if there's a real formula to it or not. I just think it's the inconsistency, and but as long as MLS has existed, it's always been a physical league, and when you have star players like Giovinco, and over here it's Darlington Nagbe, he's constantly kicked around the field, and not a lot is done about it. So I think that's until the tone is set where that's not going to be tolerated, it's going to continue to happen.
And I think I was thinking of this guy, and I was discussing this gentleman with someone else a couple days ago, Pierluigi Collina. We all know him with the wonderful calls he made and the bald head. the Italian ex-international referee. I think it's time to bring over a guy like him or someone even like a Howard Webb and start to help these referees here in MLS, instruct them, advise them, guide them, speak to them, have a one-on-one session when they're having bad games. That's one idea. The other idea is this, Dan. How about getting some guys in Europe when it's the off season, come over here in June, in July, in August, and pick up some extra cash and ref some games. They're a brand new set of eyes. You can't say that they know the teams inside out because they can't. And maybe that'll work. Your thoughts?
Yeah, I think that's a good idea. You know, the way it's set up, though, it's pro and U.S. Soccer and MLS. It's one big partnership, and I think you'd have to get these referees to join the pro organization. And I don't know, the ins and outs of that and what that would entail, but I'm sure that there would have to be some rules adjusted and things, exceptions made for some of these referees to come over from foreign leagues. So I think that'd be a great idea. I mean, the more talent, as MLS gets more talent player-wise, I think it only makes sense for some of the best referees in the world to be over here as well, and I think that'll elevate everybody's level.
Let's talk about the game a little bit, and then we'll move on to the rest of the Western Conference. Watching that game a bit of Seattle and Portland, I would still take Portland's as starting over Seattle's any day right now, because Seattle has a lot of firepower, but it's not recently anyway showing that. To me, I'll take the grit, the heart of Portland any day over Seattle. I've said that for the last number of weeks. I'll stick by that. But to me, I think that Portland has to address finishing and putting the ball in the back of the net. I look at Rudy on the bench and I say to myself, why isn't he out there? Why isn't he, Dan?
Well, I mean, right now you've got all these attacking players in Portland and not enough spots for him, to be honest. Fernando Adi is who they're starting right now at striker, and he used to be a designated player. He's still making designated player money, so you're going to put him out there, and as long as he's producing, which he hasn't the last couple games, but with Caleb Porter and the way he goes about his lineups, he likes, especially as the season comes to a close, he likes to, as he says, have his set lineup and that consistency out there. And he's going with Adi right now at striker, and in the games that Urruti has played recently, he hasn't really produced a lot either. So you can't really say that he's leaving goals on the bench in any way. I mean, both those guys have been up and down this all season long, basically. So, but yeah, I mean, they showed their talent, I think, against Seattle, and they showed that they could go toe to toe, as Caleb Porter put it in the post game, and really dominate them. But the finishing killed them, and that's what is, at the end of the day, that's what it's going to come down to. And if they're going to make any kind of run in the playoffs, they're going to have to figure out how to score goals, and they haven't. Obviously, they're one of the worst goal scoring teams in the league this year, and they have been shown a lot of heart defensively. But when you're not putting the ball in the back of the net, I just don't see a deep run in the playoffs.
Well, talking about the playoffs, and we talked to Kyle McCarthy about the playoffs, to me, if I'm Seattle, I'm big-time concerned. Forget Portland, because they're still 2 points ahead, and they showed they can play with you toe-to-toe. If I'm Seattle, watch out. Here comes San Jose. Big wins against L.A., big wins against D.C. This is a team that's for real. This is a team that could be real dangerous come the playoffs. And I also said this to Kyle, and I'd like to get your thoughts as well, Dan. I don't think we should count out Colorado. Here comes Colorado. We had on Clint Irwin, the goalkeeper with the Rapids, on last week, and I made the big mistake of talking to him about next year and trying to change things up a bit. And he said, Anthony, we're going for it this year to get into the playoffs. And yes, they're 5 points back. But you know what? The way Seattle's been playing and the way San Jose and Colorado are, watch out.
Yeah. Well, I think it's really good. You're seeing a kind of a formula with these teams, and San Jose, obviously, Colorado, obviously, are teams that went through a lot of change in the off season. A new coach in San Jose who's always been successful in MLS. So you put that in play, and it's going to take some time to kind of get on the same page. And I think you're seeing that now. You're finally seeing the systems come and the talent that they've added in the off season come to fruition. And yeah, I mean they're surging right now. And on the other hand of it, you've got Seattle, who've just made a bunch of changes. They've got injury problems. They went into an absolute tailspin, with injuries and just suspensions and all that. And, they just haven't recovered from that. So, Seattle definitely has a ton of firepower. You can't take that away from them. But I think, you're going to see it take some time to get on the same page, kind of like it did in 2013 when Dempsey first came over. They crashed out of the playoffs, and then the next year they won the Supporters' Shield. So, I think you're seeing that you can't just make a bunch of changes, bring in new coaches, and have it automatically work right off the bat. It's going to take some time. And right now, Colorado and San Jose you're starting to see that come to fruition.
Dan, you mentioned changes. You mentioned firepower. I think of the LA Galaxy a couple weeks ago with Dos Santos signing there. Everyone basically wrote the names on the championship trophy. I'm not one of them. And I got to tell you, we saw that with San Jose, defensively sound, offensively knowing when to counter and go up against the Galaxy, and they did it well. I'm telling you right now, I think if it's KC and LA in the Western Final, or even Vancouver, watch out. I don't think that LA will get to the final. I think Peter Vermees is the best coach right now. I mean, Bruce Arena has all the tools at his disposal. I don't think Peter Vermees has all the tools that Arena has. So to me, I'll take Vermees right now, head-to-head against Arena, and see them in the final. Your thoughts?
Yeah. Well, it's going to take a smart game plan, and I think what you mentioned are two teams that, Vancouver and Kansas City are teams that have an identity to them, and that's what it's going to take to beat LA. Because if you don't know what you're doing out there and you don't have a good game plan, you're going to get overrun just by the sheer talent of the Galaxy. But if if you have an entrenched game plan, you're smart about it. You're to a certain extent, you're going to have to be compact against the Galaxy because they do have so much talent, and they're probably more talented, especially in the attack. I mean, the defense is still kind of up in the air, perhaps a little bit, and that's their weakness. And so coaches like Vermees and you're seeing it with Carl Robinson, who I think is an up and coming coach in this league. He's instilled that identity in their team, and those are teams that are going to have heart, are going to be physical with you, and knock you off the ball a little bit. So, and that's what I think it's going to take to beat the Galaxy.
Lastly, just before we let you go, Dan, we really appreciate your time. From someone out west and from someone watching the league for a number of years, and this year, the magic that Giovinco has displayed with TFC, and the real historic day here last week, being called up to the Italian national team, and then unfortunately an abductor injury caused him not to suit up for the Azzurri and coming back here to Toronto. How important is that in the big scheme of things of MLS to see players like Pirlo, who will be playing in these two qualifiers, and Giovinco and others now playing in important Euro and World Cup qualifiers for their country coming from MLS?
Yeah, I think it's a big milestone. I mean, you can't argue that. It's huge, and especially when you talk about Toronto and the huge Italian population there. I mean, it's huge for the city, and it only helps the league. It's just one more milestone for the league to knock off into becoming one of the premier leagues in the world. And when you see players like Giovinco, who's one of the best players in the world, you can't argue that. And to see, obviously we won't see him with the Italian national team this time around, but that's obviously down the road. And guys like Pirlo is at the tail end of his career, but Giovinco is at the prime, in his prime right now, and he's a premier player. And I think people around the world are going to take notice and start really paying attention to MLS as a real formidable league. And I think the players will just continue to follow. It's just going to be a snowball effect.
And it's long overdue, and I think a lot of people appreciate that, to follow the league like you and I. The people are now starting to give respect to this league like you and I have. Dan, really appreciate you taking time. Enjoy the rest of your evening. Enjoy the weekend's action, and as well, USA and Peru coming up in 24 hours' time. We really appreciate it. And again, keep up the great work with MLSsoccer.com, my friend.
Anytime, Anthony. Appreciate it.
Dan Itel of MLSsoccer.com, class act, top individual, knows his stuff inside out. That Western Conference, he can tell you inside out the ins and outs, the pros and cons.